In this video recording, we are going to revise the preparation of the general journal and making general journal entries. These are the learning unit outcomes for learning unit 5, and the general journal is covered in learning unit 5. Remember again that at the end of each learning unit, you need to go through these learning unit outcomes and make sure that you will be able to answer a question based on each one of these outcomes. In Learning Unit 4, we showed you how to do the cash journals, and in Learning Unit 5, we covered the credit journals. Now, for this particular video, we are going to focus on the preparation of the general journal. And typically, we will use the general journal for transactions that are not cash, because for those we have a cash journals, and which are not really credit transactions either, because for those we have the credit journals. So the general journal is now used for all the other transactions. Typical entries that you'll find in the general journal would be if your owner, just show it over here, if your owner was making a contribution of an asset to the business, not cash, but an asset. If the owner takes drawings from the business, again, non-cash drawings, so inventory or stationery could be taken by the owner. Then we have our settlement discounts granted and received. We have the interest paid and received. This will not be the interest paid or received to the bank or on a loan, but these will be the ones charged to debtors, or that's charged by a creditor on our account. And then credit losses will be recorded in your general journal, and also the correction of any errors. So these in the first semester are your typical entries that we will record in the general journal. This is what your general journal looks like. So it looks a little bit different to the other journals that we've covered in learning units 4 and 5. It contains a little bit less detail maybe than what we have traditionally seen in our other journals. So once again, we will record a document number in this journal, and that will typically be your journal voucher number. We will record the day of this transaction as well as the details, and in this journal, the details here would be general ledger account names. So when we talk about details in the general journal, we're looking for general ledger account names. This folio column we typically do not require in first year accounting. So you'll see we don't really write anything in this column in our first year accounting. And then we have columns for the amounts, and that will be the amount that we're going to debit and the amount that we are going to credit. Let's look now at a few examples and how we're going to record them in the general journal. Now, for these examples, I'm using question 5.4 in your textbook. So if you would like, you can open up your textbook now. You can pause the video and quickly open question 5.4 in your textbook, and then you can follow along with the entries that we're going to do. In my textbook, it's page 162 for question 5.4. So the first entry we're going to look at is where the owner made a contribution, a capital contribution to the business in the form of an asset. In this one, it was furniture that the owner contributed to the. So when we do a general journal entry, the first thing that we're going to record is the general ledger account that we will debit. So for this particular entry, we are going to debit the furniture account in the general ledger with the amount of the furniture, 15,000 rands. In this particular entry, they said that we were not allowed to claim input VAT, so there's no VAT in this entry. you will see some of the other ones we will do later. We will actually have a VAT component to the entry as well. And there you can see my journal voucher 19. That's my document number. And this transaction took place on the first day of the month. So the first thing you always write down in your general journal is which general ledger account are you going to debit and what will be your amount. Then the next thing you're going to do is you're going to write down which general ledger account are you going to credit. And because in this example it was a capital contribution from the owner, we are going to credit the capital account in our general ledger. Okay, so the credit side of this entry goes to the capital account. So once again, remember we said over here where we write down details, we're looking for general ledger account names. So you can refer back again to that page 53 in Learning Unit 2 if you still need to do a bit of revision on what is meant by a general ledger account name. Then the third thing that we do is we write down something that we refer to as a narration. Okay, so the accounting word for that is narration. And that is just a very brief sentence that just explain why did we have to make this entry. And in this instance, we just said it was a capital contribution by the owner. These narrations are just very short, very brief sentence to say, why was this transaction needed? And normally you can just use the wording that they've given to you in the question to just make the narration for your entry. So remember, step number 1 is to do the debit entry. Step number 2, do the credit entry. And step number 3 is write down your narration. Now remember again, the golden rule of accounting says that for every transaction we need at least 2 entries, one of them debit, one of them credit. So your general journal entries are no different. They are still double entries, or they need one entry that is a debit, or at least one debit, and you need at least one credit. Okay, because this is a double entry, so we need at least 2 entries, one debit and one a credit. And we also have to make sure that the amount that we debit and the amount that we credit is exactly the same. Because if it's not the same amount, then your accounting equation won't balance. So your total debits and your total credits must equal. Otherwise, you have made a mistake in your entry. So always remember to check that quickly once you've written up your entry. So let's practice another one now. The next one we're going to practice is drawings. So again, we're looking at question 5.4 and we're looking at the entry that was listed there on the 5th. And on that day, the owner took some of the entry, some of the inventory for their own use. So again, as always, we begin with which general ledger account are we going to debit this entry, and we're going to debit the drawings account because the owner has taken inventory for their own use. Remember, your owner will always take it at cost price. And for this particular question, we had to work out the cost price because we were given the selling price and the markup. So remember again, in Learning Unit 3, we covered your markup calculations and your VAT calculations. If those are still an issue for you, please refer back to the 2 videos that's available to you on VAT calculations and markup calculations. So the first thing is, which account are we going to debit? Then the second is, which account will we credit? Now, in this particular transaction, you can see we're actually going to credit 2 accounts. So we have one debit and then we are going to credit 2 accounts because in this particular transaction there was a VAT implication as well. So we are going to credit the inventory account because we're taking inventory out to give it to the owner, and we have to credit our output VAT account as well. Here are your VAT calculations. I've done it here on this slide in 3 different ways in which you can calculate the VAT for this particular entry. And again, these VAT calculations come from learning unit number 3. So if you are still struggling a bit with your VAT calculations, please go and watch the short recording on VAT calculations. That's also available to you. Okay, so remember our 3 steps again. First is which general ledger account are we going to debit? Second, which account or accounts are we going to credit? Third, we write down our narration. And remember again, your narration is that short 1-sentence story. Why was this entry needed? And the fourth thing that you're going to do, you're going to make sure that your total debits are in fact equal to your total credits. So when I add together these 2 credit amounts, they must add up to 3,548 and 25 cents. Otherwise, it means we maybe made a mistake in our VAT calculation or some other mistake that we need to look into and correct. Now, this particular entry is for when the business used the perpetual inventory system, because I'm crediting over here the inventory account. In Learning Unit 6, we are also going to teach you how to record entries for the periodic inventory system. And if this particular entry took place in the periodic inventory system, we will not credit the inventory account, but we will credit a purchases account. Just keep that in the back of your mind. Once we get to Learning Unit 6, then we will talk a lot more about the periodic inventory system, and then you will see that this particular entry will be tweaked slightly because the business will then use periodic inventory and not perpetual inventory. Okay, so now you can pause this recording here and then you can try the journal on the 6th for yourself. So in this particular entry, the owner once again took inventory. This time we were working with a gross margin or a markup on the selling price. And once again, we have to work out the cost price of the inventory that the owner is taking. So try and see if you can do this general journal entry on your own. Once you've completed the entry, then start the recording again and have a look at my answer. Okay, so if you've started the recording again, it means that you have made your general journal entry. So let's just double check what we were looking for. So you first up, you would have said which account are we going to debit? And we're going to debit the drawings account because the owner is taking inventory from the business. Then which account or accounts are we going to credit? For this particular transaction, we credit in 2 accounts, inventory and output VAT. And we're doing the inventory entry over here because in this question, the business is using the perpetual inventory method. And remember again that drawings always happens at the cost price. So we needed to work out the cost price of the inventory before we made the entry. So you can see that there over here, I'm using the cost price of the inventory. And then the third thing is I wrote down my narration. So my little 1 sentence, why am I making the entry? And then I double check that my debit and credit amounts are equal. So if you always follow these 4 steps when you do a general journal entry, then you will have no problems with your general journal entries. Before we conclude this video, let's just practice one more entry to make sure that you can make these entries. So the last one that we're going to practice is your journal number 8. So try and see if you can do this one also on your own. Again, this is a drawings entry, and it's one this time around the owner is taking stationery out of the business and not inventory. So again, pause the recording here and have a look if you are able to do this general journal entry, and then start the recording again. Sometimes what I find what helps me is if I just quickly draw some basic T accounts. If I draw some basic T accounts, it always helps me to visualize the entry better. And then once I can see the entry in the T accounts, it makes it easier for me to write down the general journal entry. So in this question, we had the drawings, we have stationery, and we have the output VAT. So I know that I'm going to use dead click. I'm doing drawings, so drawings will be debited because the drawings with dead click will increase on the debit side. I am taking stationery, so my stationery is going to decrease, so that's going to be on the credit side. And output VAT is a liability, and liabilities increase on the credit side. So now I'm able to visualize what the entry is going to look like in the general ledger. And this always just makes it a little bit easier for me to write it down in a general journal format. So then in the general journal, I'm showing that I'm going to debit drawings. I'm going to credit stationery and output VAT, and there is my narration as well. These general journal entries can sometimes require a bit of extra practice. So if you haven't done these questions in class, please take some time to practice them at home. So in Learning Unit 5, there's question 5.4, the one that we were working with. And then at the back of your textbook in Annexure B, there are also 3 revision questions with general journal entries. And remember again, in your textbook, in Annexure A, you have got the solutions to the textbook questions. And in Annexure B, where there's the revision questions, you also have the answers to the revision questions. So once you've tried these questions at home, you can then mark them against the answers. Remember again, to be successful in this semester, you need to attend as many classes as you can. You need to consistently work at home. So you need to be doing all those exercises that I've mentioned in the video. If you're struggling, please reach out to your lecturer, and the key is not to fall behind. Okay, so please make sure you are keeping up with the work covered in class by your lecturer. In terms of learning units 4 and 5, there are some excellent examples in these 2 learning units, and I would say that you need to work through all of these examples at home. If you are able to complete these examples, then you have a good understanding of learning units 4 and 5. But if you are struggling with anything in these learning units, please reach out to your lecturer. Remember again that you need to make sure you are using and working with your Accounting 1A textbook. So please make sure that you are practicing all the examples and all the questions in the textbook, and you are also summarizing and working through the theory in the textbook. Videos like these are only teaching aids, and they are not intended to replace your textbook or the notes, and notes and other material provided to you by your lecturer.